All right, listeners, this is your host, Mr. Straight Talk. Uh, just a disclaimer before we start this podcast, I'm not an expert in the topics I usually present on the podcast here. This is purely a conversation with my guest, which I like to open source to you all. So, with that, I would like to introduce to you all Dr. William Fredlund. Dr. Fredlund, are you on the line here with us?
Yes, I am. I think I
All
think I
right.
am. I hope I
Yes,
am.
yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. It was
Good.
great.
Good. Good.
How
Good.
how are how are you doing? Are you safe and
Fine.
healthy?
Now that we've figured out podbean, yes. Yes,
Oh
I'm fine.
yes,
Yes.
yes. We
Yes.
got to the bottom of this.
Yeah, I still didn't
Unfortunately,
find that little enter in button, but it works, so I guess we just go forward with it working the way it is.
yes. So I would like to introduce, if you don't mind, Dr. Fredlin, I'd like to introduce you to the listeners of the
Sure.
podcast. So
Sure.
uh, Dr. Fredlin is a history scholar and a professor. He obtained his PhD in history, historical sciences, and humanities studies. Is that correct, Dr. Fredlin?
Yes. Yes, it's
From
Stanford
from
University,
from Stanford University.
our
Yes,
neighboring farm over there among the eucalyptus trees. Eucalyptus
yes.
trees are disappearing
Wonderful,
fast.
wonderful
Yes.
university. Yes,
Yes.
and Dr. Fredlin, you currently serve as a director for the University Institute
The
for
Institute. Yeah, the
yes,
Institute for the Study of Western Civilization. Yes, in Cupertino. Yes.
in Cupertino. Do you want to
Yes.
share some of the story behind the institute and what the institute
Well,
does?
sure. I can. Sure, I can explain how it came to be. Yes, I was on the faculty at Stanford when we went through the great debate about Western civilization at Stanford. It all started in
Hmm.
1987, 88, and it's famous because Jesse Jackson led demonstrations on our campus and chanted as the demonstrators snaked around the campus, hey ho, Western Civ has got to go. And
Hmm.
as part of that, the university had infinite numbers of meetings to find out what to do about Western Civ. And of course, the answer was close it down. So that is really the beginning of the great national and even international debate
Hmm.
about teaching Western Civ. And the decision was stop teaching it, it's a terrible thing. So that's the beginning of it. And so by 2000,
Hmm.
which meant during a 10-year period, we all saw what was happening. By 2000, a number of institutions, including the University of California, Santa Cruz, asked me to set up a class, just a class, for their extension services in Cupertino. So we started doing what was just a class in the beginning, and then it grew to a whole year class, and then it expanded into a number of years. So the general public still, even though the universities had decided to close a lot of the Western Civ programs, the general
Hmm.
public was still very much interested. In fact, even more so because they'd read
Hmm.
all the newspapers and the New York Times and everybody else, and so they were even more interested than ever. So from 2000 on, my class and allied classes grew. So about 2001, a group of friends who were supporting all this said, there's so much interest, I think you really could have an independent institute that would do it. And that's how we came into existence. So soon after 2000, we got a building, set up a program, and we are approaching 20 years now. So we've been doing this for about 20 years.
I've watched your lectures. I find
Yes,
it really fascinating, and
anybody can see them. You can, where you are listening to this podcast, you could watch the lectures, and if you want to find out about it, just call the office, and they can tell you. We have a website, so you can look on the website to find out everything about it, the classes that we're going to offer this summer, and it's all available at westernciv.com. Very easy website address to remember. Just westernciv, all one word, westernciv.com. So you can look and see classes this summer. It's all, of course, now being streaming because
Yeah.
none of us can have classes in the building. So therefore, anyone listening to the podcast, if they're in, Missouri or New York or anywhere else, they can watch them.
I
In
think
India, they could watch them if they wanted to.
they could watch it in India. They could
Yeah,
watch it in
anywhere.
Europe. They
Yep,
could watch it
yep,
in
yep,
in
yep.
China. That
China,
brings us
absolutely.
that
Yeah, that
that
brings
brings
us
us
to
to
China. Yeah,
China, which is
yeah, yeah.
the topic of interest
Mm-hmm.
everywhere we
Mm-hmm.
go.
Very much
Uh,
so.
so
Yes.
so I was trying to see how we could uh, get into the discussion about China,
Sure.
and I was just trying to put one and two together, and it just thought came to my
Well, I was
mind.
thinking too. I was thinking about the same thing, and the most direct connection that I would
Uh-huh.
say in my studies was
Hmm.
when we got to Marco Polo, which would be in a medieval history course.
Uh-huh.
All of a sudden, I had to turn my attention to China in the Middle Ages, and in studying Marco Polo, it was absolutely fascinating. It was a great breakthrough for me because
Mm.
the idea of these Venetians
Yeah.
traveling all the way to Beijing and
Uh-huh.
living there for years and really learning the culture and learning about the culture. And then this amazing kid who grows up and goes through his youth and then finally comes home to Venice and writes a book about it all. It's really an extraordinary story. Some people think he never went, but it's absolute nonsense. He certainly went and he learned a lot, and he wrote a great book. It's one of the books written where the writer is in jail. There's so many great books that are written because the writer is thrown in jail and had a lot of time to do it.
So the writers are thrown in jail
Yeah, he
because
was
they're
arrested. Yeah, he was arrested in a variety. He was in shipping, of course, and so there was
uh-huh.
always a danger of your ship being captured and then some enemy. These were the Genovese, the Genova people,
Sure,
and they
sure,
were the number one enemy of Venice. Venice and Genoa controlled
correct.
the whole of the trade that went over the mountains. So in the 1300s, every single thing that came from China went over the mountains to northern Europe. You didn't put it in a ship and take it around outside because nobody
Sure,
wanted to leave the Mediterranean. So
sure.
therefore, every single trunk that came in from a ship in either Venice or Geneva went from those two cities over the mountains, the Alps. And so the number one enemy of Venice was Geneva. This lasted, of course, till Christopher Columbus, and then that was the
Mm.
end. Both
Yep.
both Venice and Geneva just went down the toilet because their whole monopoly was dead.
So Chinese civilization and Chinese culture is, would you say it's about 4,000 odd years
Yes,
old?
yes, yes, probably five. We'd say
5,000,
five.
yeah.
Yeah, five,
And
because most of these big important civilizations that are all contemporary, Sumeria, India, China,
mhm,
they're all 3000 BC.
yeah. And
They all originate about the same time.
so if we have to uh, visualize Chinese evolution, the cultural evolution, how it transitioned itself from an imperial or a dynasty,
Mm-hmm.
ruled by kings,
Mm-hmm.
into
A
right
modern,
now a
right,
modern
right,
China.
right.
Uh, if we have to compare each of those maybe 100 years, which other civilization was equally modern or equally powerful to China during each of those maybe 100, 500 years
Well,
while it evolved?
obviously the Chinese story was completely different because of its geography, topography than
Hmm.
Europe. So China seems to have had a sort of obsession with unification, and
Hmm.
that other countries, even Mesopotamia, which had lots of entrances in and out of its area, and
Hmm.
certainly Europe, the most willing to accept a kind of multi-center organization. China was obsessed from the very beginning with centralization, and it always has been. And so that's the line you can see from the most ancient Chinese to
Hmm.
the first century, the fifth century, the 15th, the Middle Ages, the Ming Dynasty, which is the
Hmm.
great centralizing, successful
Hmm.
dynasty, probably the most successful. and then the modern. The modern Chinese government right now has a terrible, terrible problem of decentralization. They're fighting a losing war with the forces of decentralization. Every single
Correct.
state on the planet is being tested about centralization, and many states have done very well with it. And one is Canada, and one is the United States. We're just both lucky because we've got two coasts, and the country is pretty much, between the two coasts. And
Right.
so our countries have pretty much stayed without breakaway provinces. Quebec went through a little breakaway, but they're never going to do it again. They learned their lesson. They don't want to be independent from Canada, so that's over. But in Europe, you have lots of countries that are in terrible disarray, like Belgium and other places. But China is the worst. I mean, look at what we reach every day. Hong Kong. They've got a real revolution going on in Hong Kong.
Correct.
But they have danger in Wuhan. They've got danger up in the north. They've got all these ethnic minorities. They're worried. They're scared to death of Tibet. They're still worried about Tibet. Can you imagine this poor little tiny place, Tibet?
I know.
With no guns and no protection, and all they have are a lot of Buddhist monks to help them. And the Chinese are obsessed with the Tibetans. They want to put them off the planet. They don't want anyone to mention it. They won't talk about Richard Gere because he was devoted to Tibet. And so you can't show a Richard Gere movie.
Richard Gere is a monk, right? He
went and studied. No. He went and studied. Yeah, he went and studied. Yeah, he did that. Yeah. But he's been all over the world. He's appeared with the Dalai Lama, so he's done what he could to bring attention to it. The Chinese government hate him just for that.
Yep.
And they're always pressuring every single government in Europe. If the French government accepts the Dalai Lama for a visit, all hell breaks loose.
I heard that they also pressurize our Hollywood movie makers, and they make them change.
Yep. Yeah, they don't want any scene they don't want to appear. They don't want Tibet to appear in any movie. They don't want any They don't want any historical reference to it. Imagine this over Tibet. Who cares about Tibet except Beijing?
So
Beijing cares.
It's interesting how the Communist Party. I mean, the history has shown us right from the World Wars and what happens after that is communism is not supposed to last beyond certain time, correct?
Right.
Theoretically. The communists,
Theoretically.
And then the way it started from the Russia and how they influenced their communist state of Russia influenced China, and the Communist Party of China overthrew the government before that.
Right.
So it all started in 1949, and from that point on, all they've done, based on what history has taught us, is they've gone and they almost triple the size of proper China. They went in and they took over the entire country of Tibet. They went into Mongolia. They went into Manchuria. Exactly. They went into
Turkestan. And now they're on the edge of India. Of India. Imagine the idiocy of that. I mean, what more stupid policy could you have? A country of 1 billion people that has absolutely massive amount of territory, and that you would want trouble with your Indian neighbors over a little, Nepalese border. I mean, how ridiculous is that? It's the last thing they need.
They actually
made. You know why they want that?
They want a war.
They want a war.
They want a war. They want. I don't know whether they want a war, but that's an interesting thought.
They do. They do. They do because in history. Go ahead.
Because the whole world is suffering through COVID, and they're trying to support their own citizens, trying to care for the citizens. They're trying to care for the economy, their businesses, and there's one country who's going and putting their troops on the border, and that's China. Isn't that strange?
And new islands. The Navy is massively expansive. We've got incidents every single day of them claiming new islands, new areas. And of course, they're
In the
hovering all around Taiwan. Every 5 minutes, they have a new, threat for Taiwan. There's a very simple reason for this, and
correct.
all you do is study history, and you see every single hundreds and hundreds of years, rulers have understood the best possible thing to do if you're worried about your power in Paris or somewhere else
Mhm.
is start a war on the border so that your countrymen come to your support and get patriotic and think you're wonderful. The King of France is wonderful because the King of France is trying to beat down those dirty Germans. And that's what
Oh, I
every
see.
leader knows. That's what every leader in the 19th century, the brilliant leader in Germany, Bismarck, and the king, the head of Germany, Prussia understood the best possible way to unify
Hmm.
Germany. Germany was a mess, in 1850. It was like 100 tiny little states, and the leaders in Berlin realized that the biggest challenge they faced in 1860, 1870 was how to unify all these little states. And Bismarck, the prime minister, hit on he knew the brilliant idea that if the Germans could cause a war, if they could have a war, and not a very big war. You don't want a long war. You don't want to have to grind away like in World War One. Oh, no, no, no. You want a
Correct.
hot, fast, winning war. And
Uh-huh.
in the process, everybody comes around and unifies around you, and hooray, hooray. So that's what they did. A little
Hmm.
tiny part of Germany, Berlin, put
Hmm.
together the best army in Europe, and the leader of Germany and their prime minister went to war with France. They just invaded France in August
Correct.
of 1870. Just invaded France. There was obviously
Yeah.
no reason to do that, but they did. And they had a
Correct.
huge, resounding success. And they won, and they defeated the French army. And then they surrounded the capital of Paris. And then poor French had to sign a humiliating peace treaty. And back home, what happened? Everybody unified around Berlin, and the government of Prussia came out of the war leader of Germany.
That
And
is
it
that
just,
is
just went
that's what
right.
history. That's
Yep,
what
yep,
history.
yep.
And it's so
That's it.
fascinating to speak with
Yeah,
you, who is a scholar and knows all these, and with that we can put one and two and three and four
yep,
together and see
yep,
what
yep.
the motive behind
Sure,
uh,
sure.
the
Beijing,
current,
the motive
yeah,
behind Beijing. They know exactly what they're
Beijing.
doing. They know
Yep.
that with a fractious, multi-province split among different parts of China, China is a mess because all of its development is on the coast. It's like one great big huge California all the way down the coast. And
Correct.
all the interior is poorer, and the further you go, much poorer. And all those
Yep.
people in the interior are angry all the time. They're just angry because it's just not fair. Why should Shanghai have all this money?
Correct.
So that's a
And
big problem if you're running a central government.
so just about maybe 15 years ago, if you see the dependence of Chinese economy to Hong Kong. Hong Kong was
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
producing what 25%
Mm-hmm.
of
Massive,
Chinese,
huge, huge,
massive,
huge.
huge
Yeah,
amount of revenues.
yeah,
And now,
yeah.
if you compare now, it's about 4%. So why is China so strongly changing their view about Hong Kong that they want to
Control of
control it?
investment. Control,
That's what I
control
think.
of investment. Yeah, it's not the population. It's not how many ships come in and out. It's
Correct.
still massive amount of money is moved
Yeah.
in and out through Hong Kong stock market. All massive fortunes, billion, multiple $1 billion fortunes, still use Hong Kong. And if Communist China takes it over, everybody will rush out as fast as they possibly can. They're already doing it, moving
Correct.
their money to New York or Frankfurt or London or Geneva, wherever they want it. But that's
Correct.
what's going to happen. Money is fungible. You cannot lock it down. It goes. It goes where it. So, but they still want it. They do not want Hong Kong as a completely free stock market because it does affect the currency, and the
Hmm.
Chinese government in Beijing wants absolute control of their currency. So that's what they have to have.
So
So
what if
they're gonna
what?
kill it. They're gonna kill all the freedom of Hong Kong in this year. I mean, if it weren't for the virus, everybody'd be
Yeah,
talking about this, but nobody
yeah,
is. Even English people who should be concerned about it because it was
yeah,
theirs. There's
yeah.
nothing, not a peep.
I think they've opened up Boris Johnson and his government. They
Mm-hmm.
opened up
Mm-hmm.
visas
Yeah,
for
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
two,
They're
3 million,
offering free. Yep,
two, three
yep,
million
yep. Well, I
people.
think it's just practically. Yeah, I think it's practically anybody from Hong Kong that has any
Yeah,
right, can
yeah,
come to
yeah.
London, and boy, they better do it. They better do it
I think
right
they
now.
should. Otherwise,
Oh, absolutely. Yep, yep.
yeah. Otherwise, people who want to stay back, they're probably just loyal to the Chinese Communist Party. Anyways, and
Well, they're
they can choose to
younger
stay
without
back.
resources. They're younger,
Correct.
and there's nothing to carry out, so they don't see the point of going to London. If you're
Correct.
20 and
Yeah.
you're in Hong Kong,
Yeah.
where do you go?
Mm,
You're probably in the university, and therefore,
correct.
you can't pick up and take your university with you, and you don't have the resources to go anywhere. So you'll stay at home, and within a year or so, it'll be gone. And then the next step will be Taiwan. Then we'll be starting to hear there'll be incidents, there'll be
Yeah.
guns shooting in the Taiwan Straits, and
Yeah.
depending on who's running the United
They
States of America, then we'll see.
they did fly a Chinese Navy, a Chinese
Yes,
Air Force,
yes, yes,
couple flights through the
yes.
Taiwan
Oh yeah,
airspace,
oh
and
yeah.
I
And
believe,
they put ships into the straits, and they're going to keep
yep,
doing it.
I believe a couple of F-35s actually just flew from the Japanese airbase, and they had to take those planes out.
Mm-hmm,
I think this
mm-hmm,
was less than 24 to 48 hour story. They
mm-hmm,
just did it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
yeah, this is scary. And then what happens if do you believe that there is still a hammer that the U.S. government could bring on by maybe taking off the peg of the Hong Kong dollar to the U.S. dollar? You know how they are tied up to 7.8,
Right,
7.7
right,
times.
right,
What
right.
happens
Well,
if what happens if they remove that?
well,
Does that would
Hong Kong
that
is going to Hong Kong is going to be less and less important.
correct?
The finances, the dollar, all of that. Soon it won't be very important. The Chinese will have total control. The protest will die, and
Mm,
then all those things they tried to do a year ago, like moving the cases to the mainland and charging people in the Chinese courts, that'll
mm,
be a done deal. And
yeah,
Hong Kong as a source of rebellion will be controlled, but it's not going to control the overall feeling of rebellion in the country. The overall country is full of sources of discontent, extreme sources of discontent. And,
correct.
and the one that doesn't get any coverage in the American media because they're not sympathetic are
Correct.
all the Christians in China who are
Correct.
growing to be a more and more and more powerful minority.
Mm,
Right now, the estimate is roughly 100 million, meaning 1/10, which is a
mm,
very important minority. I mean, if you go back to Roman history, where the Christians were 1/10,
correct.
that was it. Once you crossed 1/10, Christianity in the Roman Empire was on the way to a Christian empire.
Correct.
So, so that is really the single most dangerous source for the government, and they know it. They just arrested the leading independent Christian minister and put him in jail, and he's now going to be in jail for 9 years, so they say, but he'll probably never
Wow.
get out.
Wow.
Yeah.
But there's so much unemployment, and that's growing within China. And the only reason
Yes. Yes.
uh, why, and I believe this is probably the reason why the CCP wants to expand its reach out to other nations and try to, they go to these different African nations, try to put them in
Sure,
debt,
sure,
and
sure. Trade,
they open
yes,
up
exactly.
and
Yes.
they open up
Yes,
factories, and they,
the Beltway Initiative is the same thing.
yeah,
And
yeah,
the Silk Road Beltway Initiative, it's a big fraud
yeah,
because what it is basically is hooking these very fragile economies like Italy with
mhm,
billions and billions of dollars of loan.
Correct.
And the government in Rome, they just, they can't turn their back on it because they're desperate. So then they take all this money in a loan and they make all
Yep.
these deals with China. And in the case of Italy, what do they get with all this money? They get Trieste as their new port, their entry into Europe, which they don't have right now and which they
Correct.
desperately want. And pretty soon, Trieste will be a Chinese city. It'll be run by the Chinese Communist Party. And then they're on their way. Then they're in great shape because then they've got all kinds of power on the whole of southeastern Europe, places like Vienna. Austria will have to make a deal, and you watch. That's the idea. They're going to
It almost
look at where the virus came in China. Just look back at the
correct.
beginning of it was right in the northeast corner of Italy. Why? Because that's where all these Belt Road Initiative Chinese are coming in the
Yep.
thousands. Americans
Correct.
haven't a clue as to what's happening in northern eastern Italy. But
Yep.
it's just huge numbers of Chinese workers pouring in. Goal is Trieste, take it over and set up a port, an international port. The little city of Trieste, which I love, is going to disappear. And pretty soon you'll have high rises and huge ships in the ports, from China, and it'll be a different city. It'll be gone.
It might even become an army base or an
It
military
will.
base.
Navy. Navy. Of
Yeah,
course,
Navy.
of course.
Yeah.
Oh, that's part of the plan. Oh, yes, Navy, of course.
It almost feels like East India Company Part Two. Doesn't it feel like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like a fake fraud
colonialists.
company.
Yes.
Colonialism.
Yes. The little natives in Italy don't realize that a great big modern British East India has invaded their little dumpy ancient country. So and I can tell you, my Italian friends do not see this. They will not see it. If I tell them, they don't even want to be told this because they don't want to be told that all that money has to be sent back. They don't want that. They want the money. So it's like little dumpy governments in some faraway place that have just been given all this money, and you say, well, give it back or they're going to have control of your little island culture. No, they won't change us.
The CCP, I came across an interesting article a couple of days ago. I was reading about how Australia increased their defense budget by 4 times over the next 10 years. And they're going to keep doing that every single year to over $250 billion of defense budget every single year. And Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister of Australia, he apparently came down with some sort of an order where you cannot entertain any sort of Chinese investment within the country. And apparently, I didn't realize because the CCP and their agents through some sort of private companies approached a premier of Victoria County or Victoria, which is part of the I don't know what they call in Australia. I think they call it
provinces, probably.
Provinces.
Probably.
So apparently they opened up Victoria as an independent center where they could use that as part of their Chinese One Road Belt Initiative, which was crazy. I mean, they bypass the federal governments of the countries, and they go into these local governments and leaders and try to hook on with the bait or something. That's unheard of.
Sure, they would. Why not? If there's an entry, if there's a structure that is possibly open. There's states. Austria has 6 states and then some special territories that would be for, originals. Anyway, six territories. Yeah, and Victoria is one of them. So, of course they'll do that. They'll do it in South American countries, the same thing. Go into local governments within Brazil, for example. I mean, Brazil is a place that they're setting up massive amount of investment, billions and billions and billions, because Brazil is just like Italy. It needs money. even though it has tremendous natural resources. But it's been
Yep.
so poorly run that it's in debt. And so along comes China. Imagine the amount they've sunk into Venezuela. Just imagine how much,
Correct.
because Venezuela has what China needs more than anybody
Oil.
else. Oil,
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
anybody else. And so if China can corner all the oil of Venezuela, they are in great shape.
hmm China's been destroying Tibet for all the minerals, the copper, gold,
Right,
all
right.
all all the rare earth mining, and I believe they found the biggest natural gas
Didn't know that.
reserve.
Didn't know
Yeah,
that. Didn't know.
yeah,
Didn't know that.
and I think that's what their intentions are, to go into. Even in South Mongolia, they're doing the same thing. They're
So it's
going in and
minerals in
invading.
Tibet then. It's
It's
minerals that
minerals.
they
It's
know about.
minerals.
I didn't know
Yeah,
that. I didn't know
yeah.
that.
They,
I
they
thought it was
just
just a bunch. That was just those monks sitting there. They wanted to.
So the monks, the monks, uh, they have a place. They have a pretty big mountain which is very sacred for
Mm-hmm.
the monks in Tibet, and they just went
Mm-hmm.
in and they just destroyed the mountain top for mining, and they destroyed the
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
architecture and
Uh-huh.
and the
Uh-huh.
landscape of Tibet
Uh-huh.
completely.
Uh-huh.
And Tibet is like a plateau, but it's at a higher level, so it's
Right.
very
Right.
easy for them to attack on, and control the water. So all the water that all the rivers
Sure.
that
It's
come
going to go
to
down. Yeah.
is
That's
go
going to
down,
go
and
down to
all and
Pakistan. Yeah. And they're trying
actually
to control.
to
They're
India
trying
to
to.
India as
Yeah.
well.
Pakistan
And
and India. Right. Absolutely.
yep,
Together. And they're
yep,
trying to
and
control that. They want to.
they're trying to
They're going to
control the
build the
water.
dam. They're going to
Yep,
build the dam. China's going to build the
yep.
dam. They're going to build a brand new dam, which will give them control.
And they just did that in Nepal as well. They took over the infrastructure, uh, building 5 different dams in
Mm-hmm.
Nepal, and
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
now they have the government of Nepal under their own pocket, and they're just trying to do whatever they can. And I think they're having territorial issues with Nepal as well, and the
Mm-hmm.
the common
Mm-hmm.
public of Nepal is not happy about that. So I
Mm-hmm.
think
Mm-hmm.
I feel they're stretching it too thin at this point. I think
Mm-hmm.
the world probably, uh, they've identified the problem here, and the common people and the leaders and the governments are smart enough to not let the CCP stretch it further out.
I
I think I
don't know
feel.
about that. I don't know about that. I fear that the lure of all this money is luring in places like Paris and London and
Ah,
Berlin, especially Berlin. They are the
yeah.
most blind about the implications, international strategic implications. They're very selfish and they're
hmm
very, very blind. And, it's the richest country in Europe, it's the highest per capita, and they're fussing just because Trump asked them to increase their defense spending. I mean, from a huge,
Yep.
huge budget of
Yep.
billions and billions, the richest country in Europe, and they're
Yep.
they're pissing on Trump because he's asking them
Yep.
to go to 2%, two
Yep.
percent of their economy on defense. Imagine Germany, the richest country in Europe, doesn't want to spend even 2%.
Aren't they supposed to do that for years?
There's yes. All
And
the
they're
NATO,
yeah.
yes, all the NATO countries. Part of their NATO treaty is they all pledge to do that, and none of them have. And none of them have. And
That is.
Britain comes the closest. Britain
Uh-huh.
again and again, as always, is the one country in Europe most likely to listen to us.
Yeah.
But Germany is just a scandal because it's the richest country in Europe. It's
Yep.
ridiculous. Now, poor little Italy is so poor that we might, say she's helping us, which she does, by letting us have bases. So one could argue that the actual defense output by Italy, and I don't know what it is, it may be close to 2%, but
Yeah.
they are also contributing massively by loaning us bases, particularly the air base in the north near Verona, and the ports in Naples. That's the main Mediterranean port for NATO. So Naples
Correct.
certainly helps NATO. I had friends who were based in Naples on the NATO base.
Wow. I find it interesting because I somehow felt the same thing coming, a vibe coming from Germany because Angela Merkel was
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
was the first leader to reject the meeting with Trump for the G7, and she
Mm-hmm.
came up with some
Mm-hmm.
excuse, and I found that
Mm-hmm.
pretty odd
Well, it
for
is
somebody
odd
to
considering,
yeah,
yeah, considering she has the biggest American bases in her country of all the countries in Europe. You'd think that's a pretty
correct,
big thing. I mean, you'd
correct,
think you'd want them if you're the
yeah,
head of Germany. You'd think you'd want those bases to stay in your country.
correct. I think didn't Trump say he's going to move the troops out of Germany, and I think he's going
He
to
only
switch.
said he only said that they were going to reduce the troops by 9,000, and all hell broke loose. She was furious. Why wasn't she
Yeah,
informed? On and
correct,
on and on. The German government was just enraged to think we'd move 9,000 troops, which is a pittance, a tiny little bit out of it,
correct,
even though she doesn't want to spend her own money at all for defense. I mean,
correct.
the argument Trump made, before he was ever elected, is so crystal clear in the case of Germany. I mean, every single thing he said in 2015 is proven by the behavior of the German government. They don't want to spend a penny on their defense because they don't think there's any enemies. See, why would they spend anything? Because they don't think they've got any enemies. They think, Russia wants to sell them so much gas and everything that there's never going to be a day when Russia would ever think of ever invading Europe ever again. So there's no reason to
Correct.
spend. The Italians
Correct.
aren't going to invade Germany. The French, they're sure will never invade Germany. The Danes are never going to invade Germany. So they don't want to spend the money. They think it's just
Correct.
wasted.
They will never ever
It's just
face
wasted. Never,
war again.
never. And they
Yeah.
certainly don't care about
Yeah.
contributing money to Afghanistan, for example, or any place
Mhm.
else. They wouldn't give up.
Correct.
They wouldn't give up. They wouldn't send a pack of beer to the Afghanistan troops.
Correct. What do you think about Russian involvement in Chinese politics? Do you think they're pretty close?
Nobody. I haven't a clue, and nobody I know does either. And I know people
Yep.
who are experts on China, and nobody
Yep.
can see the prediction. Nobody can see what could happen or will happen. Theoretically, they're enemies. Theoretically, if
Correct.
you've got
Correct.
several
Correct.
thousand-mile border, you're
Yes.
enemies, no matter
Plus, wasn't
what you
there
say.
wasn't there a territory within the Russia and China border, far towards the east, uh, where there was always, I think it's close to a lake. I don't quite remember. I'm not a history scholar.
There were clashes all the
Yeah.
way back,
Yeah.
all during the 90s and the
Correct.
80s. And the
Correct.
further back you go, yes, there
Correct.
were constant clashes. Under
And
under the communists in Moscow, they
yeah.
had continuous clashes because, of course, Stalin and then his successors were scared to death of China.
Yep.
It was a billion people. They thought they could come right over the border any day. So they were terribly scared. I don't know what Putin thinks about China. I mean, I haven't a clue.
I feel my I feel they will side with China, and the reason for that, the only thing I feel that way is because they supply the weapons basically to China, right? They supply all their missiles, all their jets, all their ammunition, and Chinese government sources everything from Russia. I don't think they can get those things
I'd
from.
have to look that up because I'm not aware of what the Chinese army needs from a Russian
I
source.
think
I don't
I
know.
think
I
they
don't know.
have I think they have S-400s
Uh-huh.
already, which is the air to is it surface to air
Mm-hmm.
missile. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
SAM weapons. They have
Mm-hmm.
those from Russia. They have the
Mm-hmm.
Sukhoi fighter jets from Russia. They have the MiGs. I think pretty much everything is from Russia. Tankers
Well,
and
there's a lot of stuff written to suggest that Russia only sends the Chinese old stuff. That they don't want them to have their best stuff. They don't want to have,
yeah.
and that makes total sense. I mean,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
makes a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
of sense.
I mean, why would you want to send your
Right.
best stuff to
So
something
if you're
that
selling surface to air missiles,
Yeah.
they could be, going back to even the Soviet era. That could be,
Yeah.
there could be a whole. Well, no, really, they can be. They have a lot of stuff sitting in warehouses, and the Chinese, may be insisting on the very latest, and the Russians may be trying to, sell them older stuff. They wouldn't want the latest weapons on their border.
Correct. Correct.
So I doubt that they're selling China the best stuff they've got.
Yep.
I doubt it.
Yeah, I think right. What it is so suspicious when, and I keep coming back to the same point, is when the world wants to heal together with this pandemic.
Mm-hmm,
Well,
mm-hmm,
everybody is trying to save everybody, help
mm-hmm,
everybody with
mm-hmm,
basic supplies.
mm-hmm,
Uh, there's one country who still wants to put their troops on the border and invade other
mm-hmm,
countries,
mm-hmm,
and that
mm-hmm.
is what is
That's China.
extremely, extremely,
Yeah.
extremely suspicious.
Well, even worse than that, you take that as the beginning of your comment and then think of the cynicism that you would have to have in a capital of a nation that's
Hmm.
informed by their scientists that they have a raging pandemic about to start in one city, and
Correct.
you make the decision in your capital to close down that city, to literally solder some of the doors closed in some of the buildings, that nobody's to
Hmm.
leave Wuhan.
Hmm.
And then you turn on your airport and you
Correct.
let millions,
Yeah.
5 million people, fly to Europe on direct
Correct.
flights. Who are
Correct.
you that would do that?
Correct.
I
And
mean,
why why
it's
isn't the
just
world
unbelievable, unbelievable. Well, why
and
isn't
why
Italy furious? They're the ones who
yeah,
got it first. They got the worst hit. They closed
correct,
their airport to China on January 31st, and it was too late. They were
correct.
already there. We don't know how many, but we do know that thousands and thousands and thousands of Chinese people flew from Wuhan to northern Italy
Hmm.
in January. People who
Yep.
worked in the Belt Road Initiative thing. So who are you that runs a government and does that? I mean,
That's
that's worse than sending a destroyer ship into the Taiwan Straits. This is like
correct.
sending guns into downtown New York.
This is massive, massive. This is
Yeah,
genocide, basically, right? This
yeah,
is
yeah.
massive killing
International
without
war.
international international
It's
war without firing a
it's
bullet.
biological warfare.
Exactly.
Biological warfare.
And
And
why is the
so
world still so quiet? I hope it's not going to remain quiet because I hope, I
I
really hope
I
that
agree. I
I
agree.
really
I
hope
agree.
there should be once major powers, United
Yeah,
States, Canada,
yeah.
UK,
Can concentrate on some of
can
these things.
concentrate on
Exactly.
their
Exactly.
own
Exactly.
citizens once everything is
Yeah.
back to normal.
Right.
I think what they should do, and this is just my hope,
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
all the democratic nations in the world,
Yes.
they should come together,
Yes. They should. They
and
should.
and they
Mm-hmm.
should
Mm-hmm.
have a policy that they will do trade
Exactly.
only if the opposing country, or if the country that they're doing the trade with,
Mm-hmm.
is a democratic country. Because if you are not a democratic nation, your common citizens don't have any say on how the government will force them to work. And
Yeah.
now you're starting to see child labor,
Well, you'll never
forced
see
labor.
that. You'll never see that. But you'll never see that because there'd be too many governments that would think they were on the edge. I mean, certainly Russia won't go along with anything like that because they'd be one of the first countries to use their benefits, and the list of the other countries. But if you just got Europe to agree to
Yep.
take all of this into consideration in a new meeting that's held in London, in 2021, where
Yep.
leaders come together and agree that the trade they do will have to be with governments on the basis of what you're suggesting in some way. Anyway, that I could see that they would do that. I could see they would do that.
I'm sorry, Dr. Fredlund.
Yeah.
You were disconnected for a few seconds. You were saying something about UK, uh, if all the countries, and then you were blanked out for a few
Yeah.
seconds. So I want to make
Yeah.
sure the
Yeah.
viewers and the listeners actually hear you out completely
Yeah.
and your
Yeah.
point.
No, I was saying that I think that the one thing that might come out of this would be an understanding of international trade that should be based on some kind of reasonable agreement on this situation for the various societies involved. So, if you had European governments in any kind of a meeting, Spain and Italy and Greece and Germany and France, they're all going to be agreed on a certain basic idea about how societies work and healthcare and all that. But the minute you leave Europe, then you're going to run into trouble. But even if Europe agreed, even if just Europe agreed, I think the one thing in regard to what you're raising here, the one thing that will happen, and I don't think there's any question of this, when this is over, when the dust settles, and it may be a whole year from now, we don't know how long.
Yeah.
But let's assume we can create a vaccine in a year and a half or something. Although, as you know, we still don't have a vaccine for SARS, and we still don't have a vaccine for MERS. So there's two Chinese origin. Well, no vaccine yet. But whenever the dust settles, the one thing that is going to change is the 30-year blind love affair of American business with China. That's going to change.
Correct.
And that is a huge change by itself. Just that alone is going to be huge.
Correct. Because the single most boost for Chinese economy was the moment China entered the WTO.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
It just went from nothing to a rocket ship just from that point on. And, from that point on, they have been deceiving, they have been lying, they haven't been keeping up with any of their promises of transparency, and still everybody just keeps a blind eye and ignores them completely. And then here we are facing a pandemic.
I think certainly that's the one thing we could say. We're getting to the end of our podcast, I know, so I'm sure that's one of the things we could say as a look back over the problems the world's going to face in 2021. The one thing that we can certainly bank on, if we're in the stock market, is the relationship between American trade and Chinese trade, American government and Chinese government, is going to change. And this sort of crazy 3-decade, the 90s, the first and the second, that's over. That when you write the history books, 2020 is going to be the year where the U.S.-Chinese changed. The U.S.-Chinese relationship changed.
And I agree with you, because I think whether you're a Democrat or whether you're a Republican, one thing that you both are on the same page is the Chinese policy. And the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, they are actually much more stronger against China compared to what Trump is. And I give credit to Trump, because he was the one to speak frankly about China and
way before he was president.
Up.
Way before he was president.
Way before. Yeah, way before. He's been doing that for many, many, many years. And,
hello, am I still on? Yeah. If you go,
you're still on.
Yeah, if you go back and look, this is something now, many, many years of his past, that he saw this in the before 2015. Boy, he saw this, and he was right. Whereas other people like Bloomberg's a classic example of the mistaken relationship. Bloomberg is still speaking about how wonderful all this is with China. Because he's up to his neck with China. Bloomberg News and all that stuff.
Chinese Communist Party has the biggest mouthpiece through the Business Roundtable. The Business Roundtable organization, which is all the top CEOs. They get funds and they get money through the Chinese Communist Party, and they're lobbying for don't go anti-China, don't go this, make sure Chinese are peace-loving people.
Yep. Yep.
They've been,
Yep.
yep. And here we go. We are at a doorstep of 5G, all
Yep.
these powerful
Yep.
chips and
Yep.
technologies, which will track everybody, and they're using these tracking technologies to, in their Xinjiang province, where they're
Yep.
tracking all the minorities and they're putting them in containment camps,
Yep.
and who knows, they're going to be doing this to the entire world with their chips. And who makes the chips in the world? China.
That's right. China.
China.
Well, with antibiotics, you just have to bring it home. That's all. We know that. Everybody knows that. They've said this now. You have to bring it home.
We have to bring medicines. You cannot.
Yep.
I mean, 90%. 90% of APIs are pharmaceutical ingredients are made by China.
I know.
How can the world
name it?
What were the leaders doing until now?
Yeah.
That is my
question. They were doing it individually and independently. There were businesses in Minnesota and Virginia and Florida and everywhere else, and they never thought twice of moving their production to China. They just did it. Nobody said anything. Nobody said don't do it. They just did it. Yep. Everybody did it. And nobody in Washington said don't do it. Certainly the Bushes weren't going to say that. They loved China. They've been the ambassador to China. They thought they were great friends of China. And certainly Bush's son wasn't going to turn against his father's policy. So they loved China. And Biden loves China. He got $1 billion for his son's phony company. So you had 30 years of Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama loving China.
Yep.
Okay, I gotta go. So your listeners probably have to go too. But we can go. We can do it again. We can do it again.
We can do this again. I would appreciate it. It was fun. It was fun.
It is fun. It's fascinating. I mean,
we will continue this.
Yeah, and
we will continue this, and I'm sure in the next couple of weeks or so, or couple of months, we will have more to speak about when the sanctions go into effect, and once we know when we're getting close to the elections. Yeah. Well, you have a happy 4th. You have a happy 4th. Stay safe.
You too. Yeah, you too.
I will. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
Good to talk to you. Yeah, wonderful to talk to you.
Great to talk to you.
Bye for now. Bye for now. Bye.
I'll put down your information up for my listeners, and
westernciv.com. Yeah, westernciv.com. That's the thing to do. Yep. Okay, ciao. Bye-bye.
All right, ciao. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. This was Dr. Fredlund, one and only. Great guy. Please check out his institution, which is westernciv.com, where wonderful resource for all European history, and there are also courses available which you can take as well. So, all right, Dr. Fredlund, it was great to talk to you. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, great. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.